thank you for joining me in the latest Ford's Workforce Chat. Today, I'll be discussing how hospital leaders can set themselves up for success when thinking about their career and looking for that next promotion with Executive Nursing Director, Tim Leen. Hello, Tim. How are you today?
Oh, I'm good, man. Thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good, mate. Very good. It's fantastic to have the opportunity to catch up with you, as I'm sure you're busy over the New Year period. So a little introduction of Tim. Tim is the current Executive Director of Transformation at South Metropolitan Health Service in Perth, and a previous mentor of mine many moons ago within the Royal Perth Hospital Intensive Care Unit. Tim has vast experience in advancing healthcare service delivery and change within the UK and Australian health systems. With a deep passion for creating and facilitating high performance within teams, Tim is a people-centered leader that I greatly admire. Thanks for joining me here, Tim, today. One thing I didn't mention is that you're an avid cyclist within the Perth district. Is that still occurring?
Yeah, look, it's my way of getting to and from work, and it helps me think about things, both going to work and coming back from work.
Yeah, perfect. Absolutely. Nice
Not
way
as
to
fast as not as fast as I used to be, Athol, but I keep moving my legs. That's all.
yeah, for sure. Um, I was keen to catch up with you today as I've been very fortunate to watch your career and be part of a small portion of it, and understand a little bit of your clinical leadership journey, from moving on to that floor leadership role and now into an executive leadership role. And I was wondering if you could share a little bit of your journey as a leader, especially in those early days of your career. And do you see some of the roadblocks or some of the steps that you've taken early on that set you up for success now?
Oh God, that's a great question. And look, thank you for the really kind introduction. I'm blushing. I'm blushing here in the midst of after coming from a run, so it's not heat. It's blushing. Um, so I think, look, if I think back as when I was a new nurse, one of the big pieces of advice I got was to get your basic consolidating skills, and I think that is really true. So specialization is hugely important, and I'm a huge advocate for ICU. Love it with a passion. But I started off my career as a nurse on a surgical unit. It was a big urology ward with a bit of vascular in it as well, in Harlow in Essex, just outside London, and it was hugely busy. But in terms of getting my time management, my leadership skills, my delegation skills, my basic communication with patients at a higher level and my organization, that really set me up. I think set me up for becoming then confident and probably competent going into a higher level, because I had that essential care skills really done. And I created we had a ward sister at the time, who was a very old school, but very old school in the right way. It was the customer was always right. Patients knew how to behave as well. So she ran a tight shift. It was almost like you presented your patients to her at 12 o'clock. That's when you were done to the day. And it was very, very taxing and intimidating. But you know what? There was so much pride about it. And the feedback you got afterwards, I think back in it and I think, well, yeah, that's actually, she's made what I'm doing really significant to the other people's life. And this was done in the patients. Now, there was a bit of a fear factor there, which I kind of think that I'll take the good stuff and I'll leave it with the bad stuff. If you weren't up to scratch, you were only up to scratch once, not up to scratch once, because you made sure you were up to scratch. So that there was that element of, this is the ship I run. This is how I like what I'm doing. So that was one aspect of it. So then I specialized into intensive care, and I went to a couple of units outside London, and then I went to the Royal London unit where I did my ICU course. Beautiful thing about the UK and the NHS at the time was you could get a contract to do a course. So to get the ENB 100, which was a renowned intensive care course at that time, I left employment and took employment there, and you got the course paid for, the postgraduate course paid for, and also you got the option of a job afterwards. But of course, intensive care was rarity at the time, so that was good. Also, the course curriculum at the time was very much practice based. A lot of university based, a lot of that. There was a mixture of academic and practice. So vivers were a big part of the assessment. So it's again going back to the scenario, presenting your patient, your intensive care patient, with the remit of looking at the patient as a whole. So going back to your comment at the start, people-centered care, it's not disease. I was told as an early age, it's not the disease you're treating, it's the patient with the disease. And I think that stood me in good stead. And then I went from there to progress into a management position, and then an education position. So I was the one educator for something like 200 staff in the ICU.
Wow.
Which was challenging. My boss said, "Well, you've got 200 educators working for you," so that was the expectation. So we didn't have it part and parcel of our role. We didn't have a separate team to do the education. We had some core stuff, but we had one person to lead the education. So it was part of your role to train the next generation. And then from there, I went into change management, and I went into the NHS Modernisation Agency, and that taught me a lot about resilience, dealing with different craft groups, and seeing nursing as that linchpin to coordinate the total care of the patient. So while everybody comes and goes, the true person that is there walking beside the patient, no matter what the journey the patient is on, is the nursing staff. And that's the target. And that's true to this day. And then that was kind of made a life decision to go to Australia. And probably the most significant thing in my career was to get into Australia. I had to go from where I was in London to go really back to being an RN on the floor. And we arrived in Perth in the intensive care unit when we had just receiving the Bali bombing victims in the 50th in November 2002. So it was straight into the deep end. There was no messing about orientation. You had the dialysis patient fully ventilated with a massive burn. So that was a rude awakening. And I almost started my career again, but with a different mindset.
Yeah, right. Yeah, fascinating journey. Really into the wolves den, especially being involved in some of those Bali bomb victims, because that's an intense environment, and lots of learnings come from that. I'm sure.
Oh, look, it's I think one of the big learnings, and one of my subspecialties was disaster planning. Is disasters tend to get forgotten about after the first couple of weeks. They're not newsworthy anymore. But a disaster like a Burns disaster or bombing disasters or any chemical disasters, they put steep pressure on a hospital for months, if not a year afterwards, to make sure that we mop up. So the intensive care unit and other aspects were clogged after that. It was a long time.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about, especially with the pressures we've faced over the last couple of years on sort of legacy that's going to leave the health system and the people working in it. It's really interesting to think about. It'd be great to, some wonderful themes that you've sort of mentioned, especially in those early days that I've seen working under you. And, you can see it come through, I suppose, some of your leadership that you've carried forward from a clinical perspective. And one of the things from working with you is that that ownership piece, and that really standing by your word and standing true to your own principles and your work ethic. Do you think that's a really a core quality that we should be promoting a little more to take that next step in our leadership journey?
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think it's really important to double click on that exactly thing. Is when we go to work, it's we're in a privileged position, and I'm sometimes, and I've learned this over the years myself. Sometimes we don't realize how privileged we are. We're probably one of the most trusting workforces in the world, being a nurse or being in the health profession. And all of a sudden, we're in conversations about life and death. We're in intimate conversations about relationships. We see the dynamic of a family, and we pull all that together.
Mm.
So actually, to own it, you, I kind of feel myself. It's that passion and that privilege of being able to influence the impact in somebody's life is just something that you really can't overemphasize, and not to own it. I don't think it would. I don't think you could sustain that. Now, when you obviously see people that are passionate about their work and people that see the end result and what they want to get it. And an end result to me, and I can speak freely to you because your healthcare position, but to us, an end result can be a peaceful, dignified death, not just survival to a poor quality of life, but to help somebody on a challenging thing, regardless, and not regardless, but as well as making that related to a patient, and it's a significant moment in their life that they will never forget. So that those last few words, hours, minutes with the patient is so important. And to be able to contribute to that and to create that memories for them to take away, that's just so significant. So I really think the drive, my own personal drive, I think when you think about that yourself, you can't not buy into it. It I would find it very hard not to be authentic
Mm.
to do that, because it'd be just so transparent. Now you see people, you don't get me wrong, it's the world is not utopian and there's unicorns running around everywhere. But you see people that are in places that uh, and with the greatest respect, do not buy into to this philosophy and get involved deeply for one reason or another. And I think sometimes you would actually have to stand and question yourself to say, is that the right environment for you? Now,
Mm.
there's a bit about burnout, there's a bit about trauma, there's a bit about getting caught up in it. But um, that sometimes it's part and parcel that you have to walk with the patient, right beside the patient, to be in there, but not enough to be it, but enough just to touch, not to take over, but enough to touch so that they genuinely know that they're being cared for and they're feeling part of it. So and the beauty of nursing is, and I'm sure you've come across people that I refer to at times, when you come to a stage in intensive care, and I know there was a stage with me where there is there's almost like an expiry date to your intensive care career, because it is hard. That emotion is hard. Um, but then there's some people that can do it, and it's fantastic they can do it for a long, long period. But there's a point where you come to the expiry. The beauty of nursing is you can share those skills in a mammoth of other craft groups around the place. The skills are transferable in nursing. So if you don't do well in intensive care, nursing has still got other options for you. Now, people that work with me in intensive care did not, that wasn't the environment for them or their skill set or their mind. But there's so much places we can work in nursing. There's a place for everybody.
Mm. Absolutely, and I think some of the points that I heard you speak is, that's true empathy, isn't it? The really empathy of understanding what that patient's going through, the family's going through. Yes, you don't have to live and breathe those in those shoes or get into the bed with them, but having a true understanding of what it must feel like to go along that journey is a superpower that so many nurses do have, and it's sometimes we don't always know how to handle those situations long term. Sometimes that empathy wears away and the stress builds up, and you mentioned burnout, and certainly my own journey with burnout is I certainly wasn't sure how to deal with the thoughts going in my head, and some of the experiences I went through. I just things just built up over a period of time. So I think if we can help others and guide them through that journey and, give them a little bit more perspective in that space is definitely worthwhile.
And it's a bit like with you, Athol, identifying those triggers when it starts happening, and knowing that they're normal, they're normal. Because some of the stuff we feel is normal. And you talk about empathy, but with the work that we do, we have to have different empathy in almost at the moment and still remain authentic. And that is a superpower. So you might have somebody that was on the verge of dying and is now celebrating, and you've just come from somebody that is dying. You have to transition, and it's amazing. And I see some of my heroes, and I just think the way you've done that is absolutely brilliant. And it's great watching and learning and seeing how people transition. And that's what it's all about, isn't it? It's the patient experience and making sure your staff are cared for, making sure that skill is recognized as a really, really valuable skill. And it's almost like a human skill, isn't it? It's almost like you can teach empathy. You can surely teach empathy, but there's a bit of a realization of the importance of empathy. And as you rightly said, the consequences of having to deal with that all the time, and that you need you need somebody to be empathetic towards you as well and support you out of it.
Yes, exactly. If you give everything of yourself but you don't have anyone sort of patting you on the back or supporting you along that journey or able to have that conversation or, saying you're doing a good job, it's hard to continue to give and give and give, isn't it?
Oh, Christ, yeah. And I used to work in Great Ormond Street in London, as in pediatric intensive care, and we rotated between cardiothoracic and general intensive care. And there were some really sad cases. And I always remember a senior leader there at the time. It was one of our medical staff. And you'd go and you'd hear these awful cases, and and these poor kids that were really sick and dying, and I'd be a gibbering wreck, absolutely running away from it. And I remember this doctor, and she was an Australian, by the way, and she had, I don't know if you remember it, but you remember that drug book, that white little drug book? It was a pocket drug book. It was from the Melbourne Hospital.
Oh,
it
yes.
was fantastic. It was fantastic. I don't know if anybody ever remembers it. I wish I had it again, because it was the best drug book ever, especially when you're looking after intensive care kids. But she remembered one day we sat down, we were chatting, and I said, how do you cope with this all the time? And she said, look, if I come to work every day and I'm a gibbering wreck and I'm crying in front of people that are obviously sick and distressed with them, what are they going to feel like? So empathy is about being with the people. But empathy is not about getting into the people. It's like being close enough to help, but being removed enough to think, yeah, you're going through something, but I'm helping you out of it. I'm not owning it and being part of it, because there's nothing wrong. She said, there's nothing wrong with me. These are the people that are sick. And if I'm crying, they're thinking, well, why are they crying in front of me? Is there something wrong with me? So, it was something that kind of I took to heart, and it sticks with me quite a while.
Yeah, it's fascinating, and as you relay that story, I've got a couple of good stories of when we worked together that forever stick with me as well. So it's funny about those moments where they sit in your mind. I'm curious to know, so some of your leadership journey and some of the stories and the experiences that you've had, have they shaped you up as a leader now, heading into an executive role? Because thinking about, a lot of people are wanting to hit the new year on the front foot and are maybe looking for a promotion, or they're wondering what to do with their next stage in their career. Is some of those skills easily transferable? Is it the same sort of skills? Keen to hear.
Yeah. So look, easy. The same skills you learn when you were younger is the same skills you learn. It's the same skills. It's the same learnings over time. So you look at the popular writers like Stephen Covey, Brene Brown. You look at kind of emotional intelligence literature. They're all kind of standard, but because of you and your growth and your journey, you interpret it. For me, I interpret them different in my life. So as I'm getting older and my kids are older and I'm wise, I feel a bit wiser. Uh, it, uh, it's just using them a tad differently. But I think what I would do is once you get an idea of where you got, um, we're fantastic as clinicians, as nurses. We get to a stage where we're really good clinicians, and all of a sudden we get the sheriff's badge, and we're in charge of the ward or in charge of education, and we kind of fumble our way through it by being a clinician, and everybody knows our core values. I think what ideally I look after organization development now, and it hospital wide. And what I'm trying to instill in our leaders and the philosophy behind our training that has been co-designed and co-developed with our staff is when you're about to go into a management role, we've got a program that you go on. It's called Care to Manage. And that gives you management 101 skills: how to do a roster, how to delegate, how to have a difficult conversation, how to deal when you're shortage, how to debrief after a really hard shift, how to reflect, all sorts of important things. So just say, for instance, Atul, you were going to be going from an RN to a CN, where you would be a shift coordinator. These are the skills we'd put you on. Now, ideally, when we get these people through there, they'll have modules to them that they'll tick off, and this is on the job training. And then we'll create a talent pool that if there's promotional opportunities in there, instead of Atul applying for it, I might be looking around into my talent pool to know who's ready, who wants, who's got the drive and the passion, and I might actually engage them rather than them waiting for them to engage me like the traditional EOI way. I'd go out to them and say, fancy working for me for a while. I know it might not be the skill set you've got, but I'm asking you now to be a leader, not a clinician. And then if the job allows it, there's some that you need to be both. And then from there, we've got an intermediate management course, which is all about care. We call it Care to Lead. And that's all about compassionate and service leadership, talking a lot about your role as a change manager, but mainly focusing on you developing a high performing team and your role as a teacher facilitator in developing that team. And then, of course, lastly, and I think this is where you look at my colleagues, and I love we've got our area executive group, and there's such a diverse group of people, but collectively they're so powerful. And it's that executive thinking. It's that you remove yourself from your functional area and you look at the organization as a whole, and you give to the organization, sometimes to the detriment of your own functional area, but it's to drive the organization forward to the areas of need and the compassion. And the areas of need predominantly in healthcare at the moment are emergency access, elective access, and dollars. And of course, making sure we've got a sustainable workforce to do that. So if you kind of think about going back where we started the conversation about burnout and development, if you added what I described to you to somebody's journey, we can have a conversation now with a junior person, both you and I, and share stories about you are going to feel overwhelmed. So it's a bit like telling somebody that they're going to experience pain before you inflict pain on them. Same thing, it's going to happen. So let's give you the tools to be reflective, the support to go to, and maybe proactively, God forbid we do preventative medicine. That would be cool. That's just a novel concept, but that's a whole other conversation. But maybe, just maybe at this stage, if we tell people the environment that we're working in, the burnout will be not less, but manageable, and we'll be able to cope with it. And we'll retain those people with superpowers as you described them, in our wonderful profession.
Yes, absolutely. And perspective is 9/10 of the law, isn't it? You know, having an understanding of maybe what's going to happen, but just giving yourself some grace and understanding who you are and where you're at. And I think there's definitely some room to move. And it's great to hear about the leadership courses that you've got going over there, because can see the real benefit for that as well. So thanks, Tim. Sorry, mate.
The leadership courses as well. What it does do as a craft group, and I'm focusing on nursing. I work across all craft groups now. What it does do is it pulls everybody together. So it just really emphasizes nurses' role and everybody else's role collectively in the team. So it moves out from the silos into actually our care is focused around our patient. And that's what it brings together. And it doesn't delineate that, and it creates the importance of the one team, the role model, the storytelling, the collective leadership, not the silent. Physio's done their part, nursing's done their part. We're waiting for the medics to do it. We all do it together.
Yeah, absolutely. And that true multidisciplinary team, that true team element, not silos within teams, is super important for sure. I know you're a busy man, still in the workforce. You've been working over the holiday period, so thank you for all that you do, and hope to catch up to you soon. If anyone wants to catch up with you or ask you any questions, can they reach out to you on LinkedIn?
Yeah, please do. And like anything, if you want to talk about it, or look for work or anything else, or get a WA experience, yeah, happy to chat. But I think the interesting thing is, I think the more Atul, and look, big credit to you to what you're doing, because I think the more we start talking about this, and the more we start giving people tools and confidence, and making it's part of our job now. We deal with a stressful situation, so huge credit to you. So these stories, let's share these stories, because then you never realize that, like, we've connected after a long time, on a story nearly about 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And that was significant to you. And there's people in my life that I admire, and I do that. And these things are so important. So if people have got stories and they want to relay it out, or anything I've said is good, bad, indifferent, or actually challenging, happy to talk through it. Really happy to talk through it.